Hello, everyone, and welcome to Week 5, NUR 300. I am your professor, Dr. Marion Johnson. This is NUR 300, Contemporary Nursing, Issues, Trends, and Management. Thank you for everybody's participation. I greatly appreciate it. I appreciate everybody being on time. And if you are having difficulties, to email, text, or call me at your earliest convenience. I'm here to help you be successful, but we are having a great time. Everybody is doing wonderful. Thank you for your participation. Much appreciated. So this week, we will have several topics that we will discuss: quality improvement and patient safety, health policy and politics, making the transition from student to professional nurse, managing time, the path to high self-performance, contemporary nursing roles and career opportunities, quality improvement and patient safety. Although Suzanne Harper's story depicted in the vignette seems credible and would be a logical way for any organization to begin addressing customer concerns, far too often this has not been the case. Hospitals and other healthcare organizations have been slow to recognize the necessity of a true customer perspective and to emphasize quality and safety in a proactive manner. The urgent case for quality improvement in the U.S. healthcare system. In an alarming 2000 report by the Institute of Medicine, the IOM, titled "To Err is Human: Building a Safer Health System," the writers extrapolated and summarized data from two major studies and concluded that up to 98,000 patients die each year from preventable medical errors, confirming that poor quality of care is a major problem in the United States. An updated estimate developed from studies that were published from 2008 to 2011 validated these original IOM statistics. Contributing factors cited in the original IOM report include the following: overuse of expensive, invasive technology, underuse of inexpensive care services, error-prone implementation of care that could harm patients and waste money. Following this report, the IOM released Crossing the Quality Chasm: A New Health System for the 21st Century, 2001, to define a vision for improving the quality of our nation's health care. This report states the U.S. healthcare delivery system does not provide consistent, high-quality medical care to all people. Americans should be able to count on receiving care that meets their needs and is based on the best scientific knowledge. Yet this frequently is not the case. Healthcare harms too frequently and routinely fails to deliver its potential benefits. Principles of quality improvement. Many buzzwords describe activities associated with quality improvement, QI. The most prevalent are total quality management, TQM, continuous quality improvement, CQI, continuous process improvement, statistical process control, and performance improvement, PI. The terms themselves are not as important as the principles they embody. Assessing and improving work processes while focusing on what customers want and need. In the example of Suzanne and her patient, the work process is completing post-operative orders that include timely removal of an indwelling urinary catheter. The customer in this situation would be Suzanne's patient, who wants to recover from surgery without complications so that she can go home as soon as possible. Essentially, the cornerstones of QI are quality, scientific approach, and all one team. Quality. To provide a better appreciation of the importance of these three QI cornerstones, a customer perspective of quality must be considered, including the personal interactions he or she experiences with an organization's personnel in addition to the products or services he or she receives. The products or services provided to the customer are not made up of just the physical items or a one-time experience that the customer encounters, but rather of all the services that go with it. Organizations actually provide a bundle of products and services to customers to satisfy some need. If the service and product or outcomes together are perceived as good value, a loyal customer following will be established. Or, as in the case presented in the vignette, Susan's patients might view the entire hospital stay negatively because of the delay in discharge due to a preventable complication. Advancing quality through regulation and accreditation. Today, almost all healthcare regulatory and voluntary accrediting agencies require QI in some form. The CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which administers the U.S. Medicare program, has conditions for participating for its quality foundation, and most state licensing authorities also have required QI standards. The TJC, the Joint Commission, an organization that offers voluntary accreditation for healthcare settings, has a strong focus on quality standards, as discussed in the following sections. The Joint Commission. The Joint Commission was one of the first accreditation agencies to embrace QI principles as an accreditation requirement in hospital-based settings. TJC accredits and certifies more than 21,000 healthcare organizations and programs in the United States, including hospitals and healthcare organizations that provide ambulatory and office-based surgery, behavioral health, home health care, laboratory and nursing care center services. Healthcare organizations voluntarily seek TJC accreditation to demonstrate that they have achieved a gold seal of approval by following the quality and safety standards established by TJC. TJC standards address the organization's level of performance in key functional areas, such as patient safety, patient rights, patient treatment, and infection control. The TJC accreditation system not only focuses on an organization's ability to provide safe, high-quality care, but also requires evidence of actual performance and continued improvement. Healthcare organizations that are accredited by TJC receive deemed status to automatically meet foundational approval from CMS. Clinical indicators and process improvement tools and skills. The basic foundation of the monitoring and evaluation process required by QI principles is in the use of clinical indicators, measurable items that reflect the quality of care. Just like the National Hospital Inpatient Quality Measures previously referenced, clinical indicators are aspects of clinical care that may be measured to show the extent to which care is or is not being implemented as it should be. Indicators on clinical actions or outcomes of clinical care. Indicators should not focus on procedures that support clinical care. For example, replacing IV solutions on the IV supply cart as they are used is a procedure that supports clinical care. Administering the correct IV solution at the correct rate as prescribed is appropriate clinical care. Both items are measurable, but only the latter is truly a clinical indicator. Indicators are meant not to define quality, but rather to point the way to assessment of areas in which quality issues may be present. How do process improvement skills and tools fit with clinical indicators? Clinical indicators helped identify the goals of QI, whereas process improvement skills and tools support the quantitative understanding of key work processes. Several different methods are used by healthcare facilities for QI and process improvement, including lean methodology, Lean Six Sigma, and failure mode and effects analysis, FMEA. Understanding, improving, and standardizing care processes. Standardized processes, otherwise referred to as best known methods or best practices, when effectively managed, have been shown to be the foundation for improvements in all areas of business today, but especially in the clinical care setting. There is a typical resistance to standardizing practice, especially when they involve providing patient care, but the realistic effect of care without standardization must be considered in the following context. Most employees receive little training on how to do their jobs. Instead, the majority are left to learn by watching a more experienced employee. Most employees have developed their own unique versions of any general procedures they witnessed or were taught. They think, my way is the best way. Changes to procedures happen haphazardly. Individuals constantly change details to counteract problems that arise or in hopes of discovering a better method. Tampering is rampant. Each of the quality improvement cornerstones could easily be applied to caregiver situations. At first glance, it would be assumed that all care practices are based on scientific evidence and research, and although many are, others exist simply because that was how the practitioner originally was educated. Those practices that are research-based, even though they represent best-known methods, may still not be widely practiced, thereby resulting in lack of standardization. During the past few years, a number of methods have been used in healthcare settings for the purpose of supporting standardization of care processes. Clinical guidelines, critical pathways, and clinical protocols or algorithms are standardization methods that are more prevalent and familiar. Although these terms sometimes are used interchangeably, the following is offered as context in which to understand their potential differences. Breakthrough thinking to improve quality. Just as standardization is critical to the foundation of healthcare improvement, so is the notion of breakthrough thinking and swift application of best-known methods for practice. The premise behind breakthrough thinking and its resulting action is threefold. Substantial knowledge exists about how to achieve better performance than currently prevails. Strong examples already exist of organizations that have applied that knowledge and broken through to substantial improvements. And the stakes are high and relevant to the most crucial strategic needs of healthcare. Nowhere is the need for QI more evident than in the area of healthcare errors. As discussed previously, the IOM report to Error is Human, Building a Safer Health System, placed the issue of medical mistakes and patient safety on the pages of many national newspapers, on the agendas of healthcare governing boards, and at the forefront of federal government legislation. The professional nurse and patient safety. For nurses, the challenge starts with making patient safety improvement and error reduction not just an organizational priority, but as a personal one as well. This means adopting a state of mind that recognizes the complexity and high-risk nature of modern healthcare, implementing standardized best practice, and working to eliminate never events. Two significant nursing functions and that most closely affect patient safety, quality of care, and resulting outcomes are monitoring for early recognition of adverse events, complications, and errors, initiating deployment of initiating deployment of appropriate care providers for timely intervention, response, and rescue of patients in those situations. A critical factor in supporting a nurse's ability to carry out these two functions is nurse staffing. Although defining the appropriate level of staffing is a matter of debate, there is widespread recognition that a strong linkage exists between patient outcomes and nurse staffing. QSAN, Quality and Safety Education in Nursing Competencies. This chapter has examined the vital need to transform today's healthcare system to improve quality and safety for patients. Nurses are emerging as leaders in the transformation and, as such, need to incorporate into their nursing practice the 6 competencies recommended by the IOM 2003 as essential for all health professionals. Patient-centered care, teamwork and collaboration, evidence-based practice, quality improvement, safety, and informatics. To support nursing education around these 6 competencies, the National Quality and Safety Education for Nurses, QSAN, project was created through the support from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. In support of the importance of these 6 competencies to nursing practice, they have been incorporated into nursing education standards and the nurse licensure examination so that all nurses will be held accountable for being competent in these 6 areas. Although these 6 competencies may seem familiar to nurses, it is important to understand them as intended by the IOM so that all disciplines, nursing, medicine, pharmacy, have the same frame of reference for incorporating the competencies into practice. The QSAN website is a good resource offering extensive information about each competency, including annotated biographies, peer-reviewed teaching strategies, and instructional videos. Readers are encouraged to visit the QSEN website to learn more about these competencies, which are essential to today's nursing practice. For today's graduating nurses, the challenge is to find whatever means are available to refine knowledge and skills fundamentally necessary to enter a partnership with all other interprofessional team members in the ongoing improvement of healthcare. just as essential to professional nursing practice as knowing, for instance, the symptoms of diabetic ketoacidosis or how to give an injection, are understanding the basic principles of QI, process improvement, and variation. Using clinical indicators, process improvement tools, and standardized care processes, and addressing patient safety in every aspect of care. Every nurse should enter practice accepting accountability for the quality of care provided by the healthcare organization and taking a leadership role to implement improvements to achieve healthcare that is safe, timely, effective, efficient, equitable, and patient-centered. Health policy and politics. Get involved. Perhaps at no other time in the history of the nursing profession has there been such an imperative for strong, involved, informed nursing leadership. The challenges currently faced by the U.S. healthcare system, ongoing and serious patient safety issues, a shortage of appropriately educated and geographically dispersed nursing and other essential healthcare professionals, complex, high-tech work environments, a fragmented delivery system, an aging population, the drive for improved population health, and dramatic healthcare system changes to provide higher quality care at lower costs affect the health and well-being of patients, families, and communities across the country. Nurses can no longer simply move forward and participate in the delivery of patient care without also addressing these larger issues that have a direct impact on the whole of the healthcare system. Frequently, these critical issues can be understood, addressed, and resolved only through the policy process. Without a doubt, legislation, regulation, and health policy directly affect how healthcare is delivered and how the healthcare system responds to the very real challenges and opportunity it faces. Nurses must get involved now in the policy process and provide strong leadership among the healthcare professions to ensure evolution to an efficient, effective healthcare system that promotes and protects the health and well-being of each person in our society. Nurses' involvement in healthcare policy and political action. Nurses' involvement in the policy and politics has become considerably more important in recent years for the following reasons. State and federal governments play an increasingly important role in the healthcare by putting in place new rules and regulations, which are obligating healthcare organizations and providers to adjust to totally new payment models based on quality, care coordination, and population health. Nursing practice is directly affected by health policy development, which is in turn affected by the political action of citizens, nurses, and many others. National attention on nurses and nursing has intensified our numbers, education, scope of practice, and overall value to the healthcare system. Decisions affecting the healthcare system, patient care, and the nursing profession will be made with or without the input of nurses. As the reader will see from health policy examples provided throughout this chapter, patient care and nursing practice are highly political endeavors, and healthcare policy determining the types of care systems in place and how that care is paid for. Thus, it is absolutely essential that nurses become actively engaged in the policy process and use effective political action to successfully achieve the development of health policies that are reflective of nurses' perspective on the preferred future for the profession and for the health of the people in the United States. What is health policy? Health policy is a set course of actions undertaken by governments or healthcare organizations to obtain a desired outcome. Private health policy is made by healthcare organizations such as hospitals and includes those policies instituted to govern innumerable employer-employee practices and processes in the delivery of healthcare services provided within the organization. A hospital's specific plan to report errors in patient care is an example of private healthcare policy. Public health policy refers to local, state, and federal legislation, regulations, and resource allocation related to healthcare service delivery, coverage, workforce, and reimbursement. The mandatory requirement for licensure to practice professional nursing is an example of public health policy. There is a close link between private policy and public policy, in that the policies of healthcare organization must conform to and are actually frequently developed and implemented to comply with a public policy. Although it is vital that the RN be an informed participant in policy development at his or her own employing healthcare organization, this chapter focuses on the development of public or governmental health policy, which will be referred to simply as health policy. Health policy through regulation. The regulatory arena is an important but often overlooked area of policy that significantly affects nursing practice. An understanding of regulatory authority and processes provides nurses with the knowledge necessary to become involved and more successfully influence the future of nursing. Regulations refer to written sets of rules issued by an executive branch agency that has responsibility for administering a law. Because regulations carry the force of the law, they directly shape the implementation of health policy. Thus, it is very important that regulations reflect the intent of the law as enacted by the legislative body. Once the proposed regulations are developed, they must be published and often published and open to public comment for a specific time before adopted as final rules. As regulations are being developed by the government agency, public hearings are held to allow interested individuals and groups to comment on the draft content of the regulations and to suggest amendments or substitutions. At this stage in the development of a healthcare law, nurses can and must play an influential role in shaping the final regulations by writing to the regulatory agency or speaking at public hearings. Informed comments are critical for the development of administrative law. Each comment received must be considered and responded to before final regulations are issued. The time between the interim rules and final rules is critical for assessing the effect of the proposed rules and requires concerted nursing vigilance and action to react to the proposed rules either positively or negatively. Final published regulations carry the force of the law and will dictate how the law is actually implemented. At the federal level, the proposed or interim regulations are published in the Federal Register. The Federal Register is the best source of information about proposed new rules as well as proposed changes to existing rules for federal programs. It is published each day and contains complete directions about where to send comments in addition to the deadlines for the public comment period. Most states have a parallel publication. For example, the Texas Register, with information about proposed rules and regulations at the state level for state legislation. It cannot be overemphasized that supporters of any new law must be vigilant and involved in the development of rules and regulations long after the legislation has passed and been adopted as new law to ensure its implementation as planned and supported. A great deal of thoughtful, focused effort goes into development of health policy. From the time a public health problem is identified, through when a legislative solution is conceived, a bill is passed, and a health policy is actually implemented through regulation and funding. By understanding and becoming involved in these processes, nurses can protect and influence nursing practice and create and shape positive change throughout the healthcare system. Health policy and politics, a key connection. Many people may view politics as somewhat shady activities that occur in and around federal, state, and local governments to influence the outcomes of candidate elections and/or the passage of legislation. Chaffee and colleagues have defined politics as the process of influencing the allocation of scarce resources. Politics can also be defined as the process used to influence decisions and exert control over policy, circumstances, and events. As the reader will see, influence is the common denominator in any definition of politics. The American Nurses Association. The ANA is the professional nursing organization representing the nation's entire RN population, approximately 3.6 million RNs. The ANA is composed of 51 constitute State Nurses Association, CSNA, plus other direct membership categories that represent state and U.S. Territory nursing associations and includes key corporate affiliated entities such as the ANCC, the ANF, the AAN, and more than 35 specialty organizations such as the American Psychiatric Nurses Association and the American Association of Critical Care Nurses. A complete list of ANA affiliated organizations and links to their websites can be found on the ANA website. Through legislative, regulatory, and political activities, the ANA has taken firm and visible positive positions on a huge variety of health policy issues of great importance to the nation and to the profession. A few of these are passage of Medicare and Medicaid bill, and then significant reforms of these programs over time, including APRN's direct reimbursement in the plans, patients' rights, the importance of safe workplace and safe health devices and practices, such as safe needles, safe patient handling, and whistleblower protection for healthcare workers. Adequate reimbursement for healthcare services, access to healthcare, and most recently, comprehensive healthcare reform. Most important, it is the ANA members, the State Nurses Association, that carry forward on the policy and political activities for health policy and nursing practice, roles, and reimbursement within a given state. A tremendous amount of health policy development and implementation occurs within the state's boundaries. And in order for the nursing profession's voice to be heard, SNA membership and participation are a must, because very few of the specialty nursing organizations have individual state presence for policy and political activity. Students are encouraged to spend time browsing the ANA website as to learn more about this nursing organization so important to us all. Students are encouraged to visit ANA's Action Center and sign up to receive legislative updates and action alerts to important nurses and healthcare. Through action alerts, members are informed when emails, telephone calls, and faxes will have the most effect. Being connected through the ANA Action Center website makes the political process less intimidating by keeping nurses informed of political issues and providing strategies for making their opinions known. Current health policy issues. Policy issues comes and goes as societal, healthcare, and public needs, demands, and priorities ebb and flow. However, several policy topics bear watching over the next decade. Healthcare reform through the PPACA, along with Medicare's drive for value through innovative payment modules that reward safety, quality, and care coordination. Building a culture of health throughout the nation, and enhancing shaping the nursing workforce and nursing leadership. Nurses must be powerful advocates for healthcare for all and for their profession. By understanding the policy and political processes presented in this chapter, nurses can make significant contributions to the development of health policies that promote a healthier society. A basic professional responsibility is to be involved in professional nursing organizations and to be politically active in supporting meaningful health policies. Just as the first politically active nurse, Florence Nightingale, used expert knowledge to shape health policy to make a difference, so we can make a difference in the lives of people we care for, in our own lives, and in the future of our profession. Making the transition from student to professional nurse. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, transition is defined as change or the passage from one state, stage, subject, or place to another. As nurses prepare to enter the profession and make the transition from student to registered nurse, they move not only from one role to another, but also from the school or university setting to the workplace. Transition is a complicated process during which many changes may be happening at once. The novice nurse tries to juggle all these changes while continuing a life outside of nursing, as a mother, father, husband, wife, daughter, son, active church leader, or community volunteer. Impact of shock in novice nurses. Novice nurses describe feelings of being overwhelmed and isolated, taking critical thinking from a hypothetical situation to real life is the most difficult part of the first year. When the expert student moves into the novice nurse role, uncertainty takes over and the support of classmates and the nursing instructors is gone. This time marks the end of one era as a student and the beginning of a new era in a nursing career. The phases of transition into practice were first recognized by Kramer in the 1960s and more recently Ducher, 2009, coined the term transition shock to reflect the transition in today's dynamic environment. Kramer in 1974 describes reality shock as a result of inconsistencies between the academic world and the world of work. Reality shock was believed to occur in novice nurses when they become aware of the inconsistency between the actual world of nursing and that of nursing school. The excitement of passing the licensure examination quickly fades in the struggle to move from student to the staff nurse role. Both reality shock and transition shock lead to stress, threatening the well-being of new nurses and resulting in anxiety, phobias, depression, changes in mood and behavior, and physical illness. Stress also contributes to nurse turnover. The National Council of State Boards of Nursing, the NCSBN, 2018, states that 25% of new nurses leave their positions within the first year, a fact that has been a substantial impact on employers. Care of sicker patients and increased stress levels have led new nurses to report more practice areas and negative safety practices. New nurse turnover in the United States is estimated to cost $1.4 million and $2.9 billion per year. Age less than 30 years, obtainment of a bachelor's degree, hospital bed size less than 199, magnet hospital status, and transition to practice programs, TPPS, have been found to reduce turnover rates for new nurses. An IOM report recognized the need to assist novice nurses in their transition to practice. The 4 phases of reality shock, honeymoon shock or rejection, recovery, and resolution, first described by Kramer in 1974, to continue to be recognized in novice nurses today. This theory still holds those for transition into practice 42 years later. This chapter offers a brief tour of Kramer's reality shock theory to give a historical perspective on the shock phenomenon. Then it explores transition shock to help the reader understand the causes and how to be proactive to prevent it from happening or at least to reduce its effects. Reality shock. Kramer describes the 4 phases of reality shock from the honeymoon phase to the shock phase through recovery to the resolution phase, where the novice transitions into the role of the nurse. Many nurses are familiar with the term culture shock. Culture shock occurs when people are immersed into a culture different from their own with norms that are unfamiliar and uncomfortable. Kramer describes reality shock as exactly that. Ducksher described the transition phase as backpedaling, as the novice nurse focuses more on doing than knowing. Entry into practice in acute care areas where patients have high acuity but with fewer care resources is one contributing factor. Because healthcare delivery still focuses on illness or disease modules rather than primary healthcare, there is a gap between nursing education and nursing practice. When this disparity is paired with lack of experience in delegation and working with teams, the novice nurse may feel unprepared for such a demanding role. Patient-centered nursing is prioritized in nursing school, whereas in the workforce, the priority is often the management of tasks and timelines. This disconnect may lead the novice nurse to feelings of failure because of the inability to provide holistic care. First, one should consider how students were taught to think in nursing school. When they prepared a care plan and took hours to complete, how were they to view the patient? The Quality and Safety Education for Nurses QSAN competency for patient-centered care is based on the premise of diversity and individual values of the patient, also requiring a more holistic view. Violence at work. When you think of dangerous occupations, law enforcement and military careers may come to mind. However, nursing is one of the most dangerous professions in America. Nursing can actually be more dangerous than a career in law enforcement. More than 75% of nurses in one study said that they've been abused by patients or visitors trying to get to patients or family members. According to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, almost 2 million American workers have been victims of workplace violence each year, but there are most likely many more because most events go unreported. Currently, there is no federal requirement for workplace violence protection. However, following several high publicized situations of violence on nurses, the ANA developed a zero-tolerance policy on workplace violence. Workplace violence is prevalent in all settings. Student nurses are also leading recipients of vertical or nurse-to-student violence, a situation that perpetuates the cycle of lateral violence that continues in nursing. The ANA's continuing educational module, Navigating the Work Environment, embracing a zero tolerance for bullying, is a resource for any nurse who has experienced or wants to be prepared for horizontal violence. Intuition. A nurse walks into a patient's room and senses something is wrong. And even though the data shows nothing has changed, the patient confirms feeling anxious. The nurse stops to tell us all her senses to observe and assess the situation. She is using intuition. Swanton describes intuition as that gut feeling. Intuition is not guessing, but a non-conscious pattern of recognition and experience. Others believe intuition is much more than a gut feeling. Rather, it has a place beside research-based evidence and objective data. Biener described intuition as the function of an expert nurse, implying that intuition develops over time as nurses move from novice to expert. Strategies to ease transition. When interviewing for the first positions, novice nurses should determine the philosophies of the agency and how the various orientation programs assist new nurses to enter the profession. There are many opinions on the best way to accomplish a smooth transition, and each nurse should evaluate the orientation options available. the NCSBN developed an evidence-based module for transitioning novice nurses to practice. The care of patients with complex health needs and a gap in practice readiness were the stimulus for the transition to practice model the NCSBN developed. This model described that a graduate will have the same preceptor for 6 months. In some settings, a team of preceptors is used for ongoing support for an additional 6 months. The QSAN competencies constitute the 5 modules used in this module: patient-centered care, teamwork and collaboration, evidence-based practice, quality improvement, safety, and informatics. Feedback and reflection are elicited from the novice nurses throughout the 6-month period. Meeting special needs of the novice nurse. It is important to review some common problems perceived by novice nurses and to offer suggestions to ease the transition period. Clinical skills. According to Biener's module, the graduate nurse must be allowed to develop clinical skills on the basis of experience. The novice nurse can develop competence with clinical skills during the orientation phase by asking to observe an experienced nurse perform those skills with which the novice nurse is less familiar. The novice nurse can also provide the nurse manager and mentor with a list of his or her skills that need further practice. The unit's policy and procedure book is a valuable asset. It should be described in detail the steps to follow for performing a particular procedure. Spend time reviewing the manual before observing the procedure being performed, and then ask questions. Take into consideration that there is more than one correct way to perform a skill. Remember, though, that it is not acceptable to take shortcuts that jeopardize the safety of the patient. Interpersonal skills. Developing interpersonal skills may be achieved by attending unit meetings, volunteering to serve on committees on the units or within the agency, and taking an active interest in the nursing unit. These activities aid the new nurse's socialization into the unit and profession. It is important for all nurses, regardless of their experience, to take part in the professional organizations at the local, regional, state, or national level. Specialty organizations often provide valuable information and continuing education pertinent to the nurse's era of practice. As the nurses becomes more confident in his or her nursing abilities and is less stressed by performing tasks, he or she can develop positive relationships with physicians and other members of the interprofessional team. Various methods that may be used to develop professional relationships should be emphasized during the orientation period. Nurses in staff development positions can be key players in assisting the novice nurse to develop professional communication skills. Making rounds with physicians and helping them with procedures open the door for communication. Asking pertinent and relevant questions ensures that the door remains open. Delegation skills. Another important skill that novice nurses need to learn is delegating. First, nurses should consider how others have delegated to them. Body language is important when delegating. Look at the person, be pleasant, and leave room for suggestions from the delegatee. However, do not allow the delegatee to resist or intimidate you so that you end up completing the task yourself. After communicating face-to-face, give a list of tasks in writing or post them at the nurse's station. This leaves little room for misunderstanding. Be willing to change the assignment if there are changes in patients' conditions, new patients are admitted, or you realize that the time needed to perform a task was underestimated. If time allows, it is always good to help those to whom you have delegated tasks. For example, if a nurse passes by a door and the attendant is trying to turn a very large patient, the nurse should enter the room and ask, "How can I best help you turn the patient?" Always take time to give sincere positive reinforcement and say thank you. Priority setting skills. Now consider the way to prioritize. How do you prioritize in nursing school? What worked then will probably now work with a few modifications. Remember, if it is not written down, it will probably be forgotten. Keep a notepad and pen in your pocket, jot down reminders of things to be done, and place a number next to each indicating its importance. The period of transition from novice to competent practitioner is critical. New skills must be learned and refined, professional relationships established, and autonomy gained in nursing practice. Knowledge and skills must be refined over time. The transition from student to RN can be compared with that of butterflies as they emerge from their cocoons. It is unfair to judge them while still nymphs. Therefore, the nursing profession must withhold scrutiny until novice nurses fly with their beautiful wings spread. Managing time, the passage to high self-performance. The previous scenarios are typical of what happens daily in the lives of busy professionals. Managing multiple priorities during a particular workday and integrating personal and work-related demands is the constant dilemma of so many men and women today. Healthcare today. Healthcare environments are fraught with incredible complexities. High acuity patients, vigilant and knowledgeable family members, and ever-growing information technology geared towards supporting staff in their work, often tight quarters in which to deliver high-tech and high-risk care, and little time to interact with patients on an interpersonal therapeutic level. Perspectives on time. Each person has a specific perspective of time, which is based on his or her own experiences, values, education, social economic factors, age, personality, cultural, and genetic makeup. To understand one's own perspective on time and the resulting behaviors, it is necessary to create opportunities to think introspectively and examine personal preferences, traits, habits, and tendencies. This is the critical step in achieving an individualized time management strategy and plan. Energy management. Sources of energy. According to Lohr and Swartz 2005, energy, not time, is the fundamental currency of high performance. Striving to be more efficient and more organized or to manage time and priorities better is all in the interest of becoming a better performer in either one's work or one's personal life. Lohr and Swartz 2005 also state that only when we are fully engaged do we fully perform our best. Full engagement requires drawing on 4 separate but related sources of energy: physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional. Just as we build physical capacity through disciplined exercise and strengthening routines, we can also strengthen our emotional, spiritual, and mental capacities. Consider Susan from our earlier vignette. Her decision to transfer to the chemotherapy infusion center, her third transfer in 18 months, came only after the sheer frustration of not being able to feel in control of her own life and homework. Time and energy distractions. We are all subject to distractions in our work and personal lives that may influence our propensity to procrastinate or not reach our goals. Nurses experience stress and distractions when they assume unplanned responsibilities while simultaneously conducting their planned work. This is referred to in the literature as complexity compression. It is important to recognize and understand the distractions or complexities that inhibit our ability to complete tasks and to meet our objectives and goals in a planned way. Box 251 lists many common internal and external time and energy distractions that each of us may experience in a typical day. It is critical to be aware of the time distractions that affect us. Time management strategies. It is easy to apply these perspectives on time concepts to nurses because many nurses have type A personalities, meaning that they are orientated towards high achievement. As high achievers, nurses go above and beyond for their patients, colleagues, and families, and often attracted to activities that are challenging, difficult, and even risky. When high achievers mismanage themselves in relation to time, they experience frustration and stress. To assist nurses in improving their self-management and time management, various strategies are outlined in the following sections. Of importance to note is that planning is the most important step in time management. This part of the lesson has focused on how to better manage your energy to control one of our most precious and seemingly scarce resources, time. Time management is important to achieving any personal or professional goals, and it helps decrease frustration and anxiety in high achievers. Without time management, most professionals could never achieve their established goals, and for nurses, many patient care activities would never be completed, perhaps resulting in poor patient outcomes. Susan and Moore's experiences in the opening vignette are an example of what your life could be like in nursing unless you implement strategies for better self-management. Thus, it is important in your professional career to initiate habits related to time management that will continue throughout the years. Start asking yourself frequently throughout the day, what is the best use of my time right now? You may be surprised to learn that the answer does not coincide with your current activity. When that occurs, stop and implement strategies for self-management to better control your time. You will become more productive and gain internal satisfaction as a result. That concludes our lecture, NUR 300, Week 5. Have a great week, and I will see you in Week 6. We're nearly done. We're nearly there. Thank you. Don't forget, text, call, email, whatever is convenient for you. Thank you once again.